Upload one winning ad, and in minutes, this AI workflow turns it into dozens of fresh variations. New characters, new settings, new hooks, new CTAs. No design requests, no waiting 3 days for revisions from your team. Just instant creative variety generated automatically. And with Meta's algorithm now rewarding constant ad variety and ad rotation, this workflow could be the difference between scaling and stalling. More creative testing, lower costs, higher return on ad spend. All right, let's jump into the demo. All right, here we go. Jumping into the demo for our ad spinner automation. We're going to run through this at a high level first, and then in the next section of the video, Lucas is going to do a node by node breakdown of exactly how this automation is built. First, let's talk about the goal of this automation. So let's say you're an e-commerce company like Whoop, and you have some winning still frame ad concepts that are already doing well. This automation will help you spin variations of winning ad concepts with new call to actions, new images, new subjects, new settings to give you a bunch of variations of that winning concept based on your brand. So let's jump into how it works. It's split up into two parts, and we'll start up top here with the brand form trigger. And what it'll do, it'll just ask us to enter a URL. We're going to do whoop.com and then the Google Drive folder ID that we want the documents to get built in. And so what's going to happen now is with Firecrawl, we're going to scrape that URL and identify about pages, home pages, and any pages that we think are going to be relevant to help give us an idea of what this brand is about, what value propositions, what products does it offer. And from here, we're going to build out a full brand guidelines document that the second part of the automation will use when spinning variations of the winning ad. So here, this is just finished up, and we can see that it has written this full brand guidelines document for Whoop. We've got an executive summary, the mission of the company, who the target audience is for the company, brand voice and tone that is pulled all from the website that we gave to it, core value propositions, products and the services breakdown, etc., and a whole bunch of information that's going to be relevant when we're brainstorming different ad variations on an already winning concept. So now that we have the brand guidelines and documentation for whoop.com, we can kick off the second part of this automation, which is this generate ads trigger. And all we're going to do with this one is add a still frame ad asset that we've already been using, likely that is winning. And we want more ideas, more variations of this winning ad. So here you can see the stay younger for longer. That's the one we're going to spin. Then again, we also just need to include the Google Drive folder ID, which is where the assets are going to be created in. And we'll kick off that workflow. The first step is we're going to insert that brand guidelines document that the first section of the automation wrote. So we're going to pass those brand guidelines into the automation, and then we're going to build a prompt for Google's Gemini to essentially analyze the still frame asset that we uploaded to get a sense of what is in that winning ad asset. Google's Gemini will identify, all the characteristics of that visual ad. And then using the brand guidelines, we'll generate additional prompts to come up with new versions of that winning concept, again, with different subjects, different call to actions, different settings, using Google's Nano Banana image generator. And all of that will be uploaded to this Google Drive folder, which we can start to click through ones that it's generated. And you can see that it's just generating a whole bunch of variations, putting in different subjects, different design features, different offers, and different positioning. Here, different ethnicity of the models. Or here we have different settings. This one's in the gym, as well as different call to action and headlines for all of these ads. Now, we could also get more aggressive on the prompting here to even more drastically change out the creative and spin it more or less aggressively depending on what we want. Currently, this automation will spin 10 variations, but you could program it to spin over 100 if you wanted to. So if you want to download this exact n8n template and automation, you can snag it for free in our school community, AI Automation Mastery. Completely free to join. You'll just go to the n8n templates section, click on the post for the automation that you want to download, and then download the JSON that is uploaded on each of these posts. And you can pull that right down to your n8n instance and clone it and start working on it for your brand. So join AI Automation Mastery. And now let's jump into the node by node breakdown with Lucas.
All right, let's kick everything off here with a system overview for our Nano Banana static ad variation generator. Just like what we showed in the demo, this system is going to be split up into two separate components. In the green here, we have our system for building out our brand guidelines. And then in the blue, we're going to have our system for taking in those brand guidelines, taking in a raw ad image, and then spinning several different variations for that and saving that off to Google Drive. So let's go through each of those components, starting with the system that generates our brand guidelines. So the first thing we're going to do as the entry point into this system is going to accept a homepage URL of the brand or product website we're trying to build out these brand guidelines for. After we receive that, we're going to pass that off to Firecrawl to do two things. We're going to crawl the website for important contextual pages like the homepage, about page, product information, company mission, things like that. So we're going to get a really good idea about what this brand, company, or product is all about. Really just trying to gather up and bundle all of that context together so we can process it using AI to build our nicely formatted brand guidelines doc. So once we have that context all bundled up, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to pass all of that raw markdown data we just scraped using Firecrawl into Gemini 2.5 Pro, and we're going to let the AI model analyze that and bundle that information together into a nicely formatted brand guidelines output. So we get that, we're going to do a little bit more data processing to format that nicely and save this as a Google Doc we're going to later be able to use. So just like in the demo, what we did this for the Whoop brand, we're going to be building out this well-formatted brand guidelines doc that gives us everything we need to write effective ad variations for this company. Context is king here when working with AI and especially with ads, and so this is really important information we need to capture correctly in order to create effective ads. Let's go on to the component number 2 here, which is going to be responsible for actually generating those brand guidelines. And so the entry point into this workflow is going to be the source ad that we want to create variations for. So you can just download this from the meta ad library, or if you have a good template example you've seen work for a competitor, just copy that, upload it here, and we're going to be able to kick that off. And so the other input to this is going to be a link to the brand guidelines we just prepared from before. And so our system is going to be able to ingest this context and really think through how to create an effective ad and how to position this for the ideal customer personas. So we're taking that in as input, and then we're going to go ahead and pass this information off to Gemini 2.5 Pro to analyze the image we uploaded, look at our brand guideline docs, and come up with several different ad variations, taking into account that important brand context so we can create effective ads. And so we're using Gemini here to go ahead and analyze this, and it's going to output an array of multiple different ad ideas that can later get passed off to Nano Banana. So we generate those ideas, we're going to go ahead and extract those with a little bit of cleanup, and then we're going to start looping over each of those ad ideas and passing that off to Nano Banana to go ahead and generate those ads for us. So for every idea we generated here, we're going to loop over that and pass that into Nano Banana as a prompt to generate our ads. Finally, we're going to save everything back to Google Drive here for us to easily view and then push off to Meta or whatever ad platform we're working with. So that's the high-level overview. Let's jump into the node-by-node walkthrough. All right, let's come over here to n8n once again and go through our build brand guidelines system node by node. I'm going to go ahead and run this trigger here so we can see what data looks like flowing through. So this will pull up our form that requests a brand website URL and an ID to the Google Drive folder we want to save our brand guidelines to. So I have the Whoop website pulled up here, and so we'll paste that in to the top. And then I'm going to grab the ID here from my Google Drive folder, which is going to be everything at the end of the URL following /folders/. So we'll take this, we'll paste it in, submit it, and that's going to kick off our automation. So if I pull up this brand form trigger here from before, we're going to see that we have a pretty simple form just with those two elements that we demonstrated. Our brand website URL is going to have a text type of element, and we're going to mark that as required. Same thing here for our Google Drive folder ID. It's just a simple text field that we're going to mark as required. And we can see after that gets submitted, we have our Whoop website here and our folder ID. After that gets done, we're going to move on to the next node, which is going to be making a request into Firecrawl's API, calling into the map a website and get URLs operation. This is something, if you're not familiar with Firecrawl, that allows you to paste in a URL like what we did here for the whoop.com website. And we can pass in this search parameter here into the body of this request. And so what Firecrawl is going to do is it's going to actually crawl the website we provided using these different search terms that, if I blow it up here, we can see we're looking for home, about, company, mission, how it works, membership, shop. Pages like this on the website we passed in, and Firecrawl will return back a list of URLs that match those search terms. I have this set to 20 to keep it simple, but you can configure this however you like. Basically, my goal when building this was to allow Firecrawl to go ahead and crawl and scan the provided website and return back the website URLs that make the most sense for us to bundle together into the brand's guidelines. So if we come down below here, we're going to see that we have some shop products. We have something from the press center, from the Whoop Labs, where they're documenting a research study, and some other pages on the Whoop website that really give us the important context we need to be able to build an effective brand guidelines document from this information. I have a Firecrawl credential already set up here, but if you haven't done this before, you can go ahead and go over to firecrawl.dev, go to the dashboard, go to where it says API key on the right-hand side here, and copy that. And then when you make a new credential, you're just going to be able to paste that in and save it. So I'm going to use the one I already have for right now, just to avoid duplicates, but that's how you set up your Firecrawl connection for the first time. After we run this node, we know that we have a list of URLs as our output. After that's done, we're going to split those URLs because we have a single array of mini URLs and we want to output multiple items. And so we're going to use this split node here where we split out the links from the input on our map website node. And we're going to output that as 12 different items here from what we were able to extract. So we go from 1 item to 12 items, and then we're going to continue forward to the next node, which is again another call into the Firecrawl API. This time, we're going to take each of those URLs that we received from the previous nodes and scrape them one by one, get the actual content on the website returned back to us in Markdown format, so it's going to be much easier to work with when passing this into a prompt to build out our final brand guidelines. So when working with Firecrawl, all we have to do is select the scrape a URL and get its content operation here from the dropdown. We're going to pass in our JSON.URL value and an expression here to get the dynamic value from each of those 12 split URL items that get passed in. And then underneath formats, I'm going to specify that I want Markdown return, just because that's going to be the easiest way for us to read and process this text content. I also like to turn on this toggle for only main content, so Firecrawl doesn't give back some of that unnecessary information I don't really care about, such as like header, nav links, footer links. Not super important for what we're trying to do, and so I'm going to turn that on. If you are working with a bit more complex website, maybe something that's a little bit more dynamic and JavaScript heavy, you can explore some of the items here, like passing in a wait for MS parameter, which is going to let Firecrawl wait a few milliseconds before it's going to start processing, just so the on-page content can render. You can specify you want it to be mobile, and you have a ton of different other options here you're able to work with. If you're setting this up for the first time and don't know what parameters you need, you can go over to the Firecrawl website, log in, and then click on this docs link. And if you go under API reference and scrape, you're going to see a documented list of all of the different scraping options you have trying to extract that data. And so if something isn't working for you the first try with this approach I'm detailing, take a look at the scrape parameters here to see if there's anything else you need to do to get that request working for your website. But for most cases, this default is going to work. So we're going to scrape that URL and then come down to the right-hand side here for each of those 12 items we passed in. We're going to see that we have this data.markdown string returned here that contains all of the markdown content we were able to extract from that URL. So this is perfect for what we're trying to do, and we're going to be able to continue forward. The next note here, we're going to aggregate those URLs because we're still working with 12 items being output here, and we don't want to run and build the brand guidelines 12 separate times. And so we need to get back to a single item by using this aggregate node built into n8n. And so if you search for that, you can see aggregate, where you combine a field from many items into a single list item. So if I pull that up, I'm going to take all item data into a single list. I'm going to put this into a data array, and I'm just going to include all fields. So this is just kind of a cleanup thing I like to do to avoid duplicate node executions, especially for some of the more expensive nodes where I'm going to eventually call into an LLM later. So we go from 1 to 12, 12 to 1, and then I'm going to do one additional scrape call here, calling back into Firecrawl, where once again I use scrape a URL and get its content, And this time, I'm just going to pass in the homepage just to guarantee that in whatever brand guidelines we're building up, we have all of that content from the homepage still provided in our final output. When working with stuff where we're trying to dynamically build up brand guidelines, context is king. And so this is just a simple guarantee to make sure you have all of that information at your fingertips when we continue forward. Let's go on to the next node here, which is a simple set field node, if I search this, where we go ahead and build up a string that is going to be our prompt that later gets passed into Google Gemini's AI model. This is a pretty simple prompt where we're going to tell AI to analyze all of that scraped web page data we extracted using Firecall from before, aggregate it together, and then synthesize it into a single cohesive brand guidelines document. And so we're setting this prompt up to be, you are an expert brand strategist and a marketing analyst. Your task is to analyze the provided scraped website content from a company or product and synthesize it into a comprehensive brand guidelines document. This document's primary purpose is to serve as the foundational context for an AI-powered advertising system. Therefore, your analysis must be sharp, marketing focused, and extract the actionable insights for creating compelling on-brand copy. So that's the high-level goal. I'm not going to detail into all of the specifics here, but if you do want to get access to the prompt, make sure you join our school community by clicking on that first link in the description of this YouTube video, as you're going to be able to download this full n8n workflow and this prompt you see here. But at a high level, we just build out the structure for the brand guidelines we want to be outputted, and then expand on the methodology we want the AI model to follow when building this up. And then finally, at the bottom, we detail an input section where we're going to go ahead and take all of the scraped pages we got from before, where we crawled, scanned, and scraped the website, and then add on that scraped homepage data too, so we can get everything in the fingertips of Google Gemini to analyze this and synthesize it into an effective brand guidelines document. So that's the prompt we're just building up as a simple string here. So we're going to take that prompt and pass that into a basic LLM chain call in this node here. So if you search for LLM chain, you can see that, and that is the exact node we're going to be using. And so I'm going to say define below as the chat input I want to provide, and then I'm just going to simply take the prompt we built in the previous node, set it here, and let the AI model run. So we can see this is the output of our brand guidelines, nicely formatted and marked down content. The next part of this is going to be where we format this data a little bit further and go ahead and save this to a Google Doc with all of that same formatting applied. So the next step we have to do here is convert that markdown from before and actually convert it into HTML, because that's going to allow us to pass it off into the Google Docs and Google Drive API. So there's actually a built-in markdown node here we can use by searching on the right-hand side. And if we pull this up, we're going to use the Markdown to HTML option. So we're going to convert this Markdown text on the left-hand side here, just pass that in, and on our output, we're going to get that same text content formatted as HTML we can later use. And so we can see under data, we have H1, list items, and other HTML markup that matches exactly what we'd expect. The other thing we have to do here is a little bit of data cleanup in the next three nodes just to work with the Google Drive and Google Docs API. Of course, you can use the built-in Drive node or Docs node to go ahead and pass in and create a new Google document. But unfortunately, when working with Markdown, it doesn't retain all of that formatting. So that's why I like to follow these couple of nodes here to go ahead and clean this up nicely so we can see a well-formatted brand guidelines doc like this in case we need to manually edit it later. Just makes everything easier to read, easier to format, and easier to update as we proceed. Let's look at this one, just another set field node here where we're going to define the document name. We're going to take in the HTML content we later need to format. And then we're just going to go ahead and grab that Google Drive folder ID we passed in previously from our trigger here, which was that form from earlier. After those fields are set, we're going to then use a custom code node where we're going to run some JavaScript code to go ahead and clean up this formatting a little bit further. And so this is something I actually found just off of the n8n community forums. And so you don't need to have a strong understanding here as long as you're passing in our document name, Drive folder ID, and our HTML content that we set from before. Basically, this is going to transform that HTML content with some specific styles needed for Google Documents, and then it's going to clean up this data so we can pass it off further into the Google Docs and Google Drive API. A little bit more complex here, but when you download this template, you're just going to be able to copy paste this and run with it. After that's done, we then finally make an HTTP request, like with this node right here, into the Google Drive API, where we post in the data we prepared from before, so raw data on the left-hand side here. We're going to post that to this URL at googleapis.com, where we upload a new file under upload drive v3 files. And then I'm going to use a credential I've already created here by selecting a predefined credential type. And then I'm going to use my Google Drive credential I have already set up from before. The authentication here between the built-in Google Drive nodes, like what we see right here, is the exact same as working with this HTTP request. And so you can actually share that credential versus needing to create many more API keys. Just go ahead and select that credential from the final dropdown here. We're going to go ahead and send query parameters into this request, as that's going to tell the Google Drive API how we need to create this file correctly. We're going to turn that on. We're going to specify using fields below. We're going to specify upload type as multi-part. We're going to specify supports all drives as true. And then we're able to get into the request body. So we're going to toggle on send body. We're going to use the raw content type. And then we can just go ahead and paste in this multi-part related and boundary equals divider content type right here, just to work with the Google Drive API. The final part we have to pass in is going to be the raw body contents, which is the contents of the Google document itself. So we're going to take this raw data from the left-hand side here. That's going to get passed into the Google Doc API. And then once that's all said and done, that document is going to get created here in our drive and has all of that nice formatting that we need. So we have headers, bulleted lists, bolded text. Everything we need to be formatted appears nicely here, so it can be easy for us to update and later modify manually if we need to. Finally, we have a set field node here where we're just going to return the ID of the document that was created, and then we output a nice link that we can copy here and load in to view that document. So that concludes the setup here for working with the brand guidelines portion of this automation. Next, we're going to take these guidelines and pass it into this component to get started generating our ad variants. Now that we have our brand guidelines generated, let's move on to the second component here, which is going to go ahead and generate ad variants given an image we upload for a source ad, and then a link back to those brand guidelines we generated from before. So coming over to n8n, we're going to go ahead and execute this other trigger here to generate our ads. So we'll click it, and we're going to provide our source ad image, which is going to be a Whoop ad we found from the meta ads library. I'll upload that. And then we got to grab the ID of our brand guidelines document we just generated. So I have this open right here. If you look after the /d/, you can go ahead and copy everything in the middle here to get your ID. Or if you're just running the first item here, you can copy it from the end of set result. So we're going to come back, paste that into our form, and click on generate. That's going to kick things off, and we can see what data looks like flowing through the whole system here. So as this runs, we can start looking through these initial nodes. The first thing we need to do here in order to work with the Gemini 2.5 Pro API to actually analyze our provided image is take this raw image file, which is a binary file, and go ahead and convert this to a base 64 string. This is just required when working with Gemini's API. We want this image to get analyzed to create our effective ad variations. And so we just got to use this built-in file node that will let us convert binary data to JSON. And so we're going to use that here. We're going to use the operation for move file to base 64 string. And so we can see on the left-hand side, we have our binary file that we uploaded from Whoop. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to see our outputted data here as kind of some garbled strings and numbers. That's a base 64 encoded string that contains all of the data still from this image, but just in a string format. Once we have the data, we're going to use the built-in Google document node to go ahead and get our document. And so if I open this up, we're going to use the input from our form trigger from before. We're going to look for our Google Doc ID, and we're going to just use the document resource. We're going to use the get operation to get all of that text content found inside our Google Doc for our brand guidelines created from before. So pretty simple to use, and we're going to use this Google Docs credential. And so if you need to set this up for the first time, click on create new credential, and then go to the docs here to follow these steps to get up and running with the n8n, Google Drive, and Google Docs connection. So that one's a bit more complicated. I'm not going to go through that step by step for now. Please leave a comment if you'd like to see a dedicated video on getting that set up. The next step we have to do is start working with the Gemini 2.5 Pro API to start analyzing that provided image and pass in the brand guidelines we just downloaded. So I'm going to use a simple set field node here and build up a prompt in its own step just like what we did before when building the brand guidelines. So we have a lot of information here, and in the middle we can see that we're actually going to dynamically pass in our brand guidelines as some of the input. So I won't go through this full prompt again. Make sure you download this template if you want to see it, but I'll cover some of the high level concepts that went into designing this. So underneath role and goal, you are an expert level ad creative strategist and an AI prompt engineer, specializing in performance marketing optimization. Your primary function is to act as a creative director, performing a meta-analysis on a successful designer-built ad creative to devise and detail a test-worthy set of iterative variations. Your goal is to take the provided ad creative and brand guidelines, conduct a thorough analysis to identify its core strengths, and then dynamically generate 10 distinct, strategically justified iterative variations. These variations will maintain the core composition and design integrity of the original ad, focused on targeted, high-impact tweaks to test specific variations like audience resonance, color psychology, and call-to-action effectiveness. Your final output will be a set of detailed step-by-step instructions for an AI image editor named Nano Banana, formatted for perfect clarity and execution. The resulting output image will be an edit of the provided image to match its original dimensions. So quite a bit wordy there, but in general, we're wanting to really set up our AI model we're working with and put them in the shoes of an ad creative strategist. So we're going to analyze the ad, come up with some ideas based off of our brand guidelines to create some effective ad variations we're going to be able to test when pushing all of these ads into Meta or Google Ads. So everything else we detail here is just going to step-by-step build up how the AI can accomplish this a little bit better. So we're detailing our inputs. We're then going to expand on the core task at hand. And then we're going to go into the required output format we're looking for, because what we generate here for each of these ad ideas are then eventually going to get passed off to Nano Banana's image API to go ahead and generate these images. And so it is important to get pretty detailed here for the input and output requirements, just so we can get high quality ads. So once again, make sure you download this template to get access to the full prompt here, and we'll continue forward to the next step. Before we start generating these ads, we're going to make use of another basic LLM chain call to get some structured data extracted from the result of our Gemini 2.5 Pro call. So if we look at the result here from the Gemini 2.5 Pro API call, we're going to see under this nested response, we have our text that came back. If you remember from the prompt, we're asking for 10 different ad variation ideas, and we're getting this large single text block back, which isn't super useful. So we're going to use Gemini 2.5 Pro once again to go ahead and read all that text in and pull out each of those individual ad variation ideas with this structured data parser. And so this is pretty simple in order to set up with an LLM chain. So if I open this up, we want to toggle on require a specific output format. And then underneath output parser, we're going to add in this option with under parameters, set schema type to define using JSON schema. And then you're just going to be able to paste this in. And so we want back an array of items, and that each of those items is a string. And so we see an individual prompt that has been extracted from the input text. Looking after this runs on the right-hand side here, we can see prompt 0, 1, 2, 3. All of those different ad variation ideas have been extracted, so it's going to be a little bit easier for us to work with these one by one as we loop over them. The other thing I'm going to make note of is I do have this autofix format option toggled on. I just like doing this to make my output parsing a bit more reliable. And so if it doesn't match the JSON schema one-to-one, AI is going to actually try and fix that for me without changing what is in this resulting output. So something just to make your automation a little bit more reliable. After we get that extracted in our clean array, like what we showcased here, we're then going to split out those items using output.prompts so we can loop over them one by one. Each of those items get passed into this node here, which is a loop. So if you search for loop, we see this loop over items split in batches node, and we can see that we have a batch size set to 1. This is something I follow when I need to process items sequentially, meaning that for every item passed in, so we have our 10 ad variation ideas getting split out here and passed into here, we need to run some kind of complex logic across each of those. And so for each ad idea that gets passed in, we generate the ad image, we set the result, we do this check, we get that resulting image, and finally upload that to Google Drive. After that completes for the first ad variation idea, We're going to loop back over here and continue to the next one. And that's going to go all the way through the whole list of items we passed in until we're done. And then we eventually break out of this done branch that you can do some additional notification if you want to, but I chose not to set that up. Let's go through what's happening inside this inner loop. So we have our prompt here as input, which is going to be a single prompt or add variation idea that was generated from before. And then we're going to pass it into this HTTP request node. In this request, we're going to be making a post request into this URL here, which tells us that we want to work with the Nano Banana image model directly. And so that's under generativelanguage.googleapis.com. And under this model section, we're going to be specifying Gemini 2.5 Flash image preview, and then we're going to tell it to generate content. Under authentication, I've already set up my credential for working with the Google Gemini API. This is going to be the same credential we're working with Gemini 2.5 Pro here. That can get reused exactly the same. If you haven't set this up from before, make sure you go to aistudio.google.com, and then if you click on Get API Key and follow the API Quick Start, you're going to see how to set up and structure a request using this REST request tab here, where you specify this Google API key and then slot that in. So I won't cover that for now. Definitely leave a comment if you want to see a standalone guide or video for that later down the road. But just remember, using Gemini 2.5 Pro and the Nano Banana API, you can share that same credential. And so it's going to be a header auth credential. I have it just saved here as Google Gemini, and then we're good to go. Underneath the body for this request, we're going to toggle on send body. We're going to use the JSON body content type. And then we're just going to specify that JSON below as an expression. So if I pull this up, we're going to see that there's a couple of different parts on this object we need to build to go ahead and send off to the Nano Banana API. The first part here is going to be the text part of this request, and that's really just going to be the prompt we're sending to Nano Banana. So I use JSON.stringify, where I give a simple generate an image with the changes and edits detailed below text, and then I add on at output.prompts value, which is going to look at the single prompt for the add variation we're trying to generate. And so, we're looping over these one by one. And so for add variation 1, this prompt is going to get dynamically slotted in. And then for add variation 2, we're going to see another prompt that gets added in here. And so this will dynamically update as we're looping through all of those add variation ideas. After we have our text prompt set up, it's then time to move into the next section, which is very important for working with Nano Banana, and that's where we're going to specify the source image we uploaded from before. If you remember from before, we had to convert this to a base 64 string. This is where we're going to use the result of that. So if we come back here and see underneath our inline data, we're going to specify a hard-coded value for our MIME type as a PNG image. Then underneath the data here, this is where we need to dynamically include our base 64 string from before. And so our source image is always going to be the same. So we can just reference that convert to base 64 node. Then we go JSON.data to go ahead and grab that really long string of kind of garbled numbers and letters from before and insert it here into the request. That's going to tell the Gemini API and allows it to analyze all of that image data that we uploaded into the automation. After the request is done, we then continue forward to another set field node where we're going to go ahead and extract those bytes back from the image. Gemini's API returns that data to us as a base 64 string. And so we're going to use a JSON expression here that's going to navigate this kind of complex response object to go ahead and get this data from that result. So we can see on the right hand side here, we have this garbled base 64 string. And then we're going to use another if check here to see if this result is valid. Sometimes Google is a little bit prohibitive on what content you can generate or will error out randomly just with the newness of AI. And so it is possible you may not get a result here. And so we're going to check that this value actually exists. If it does exist, we're going to continue forward. If not, we're just going to skip over and loop over to the next add variant that we want to create so the whole thing doesn't fail on us. So assuming this does exist and was generated successfully, we're going to use another file node here where we convert JSON data to binary data. And so this is the invert of what we did before. So instead of going to a base 64 string, we're going to go from a base 64 string to a binary file. So if I open this up, we're going to say move base 64 string to file. We're going to use this image result from the input node here, and we're going to output that as data. So if I click view, we can see our brand new ad variant that was just generated. And it looks like we got a little bit of a typo here. So not the best variant. That's why we're doing this in bulk. So we can see a large set of variants that we're going to be able to easily manually approve or disapprove as we pass it off into the pipeline further. So we got our image generated. And finally, we're going to upload this into Google Drive using the built-in Google Drive node. So you can swap this out with whatever your database is. Google Drive is easy to work with, and so that's why I set this up. So we can see we have our data as input here. We're going to use our existing Google Drive credential. We're going to use the file resource, the upload operation, and we're going to match our input here from data to data in order to get that binary file uploaded. I'm just going to call this something simple like add variation. I'm going to give it a number to match which variation we're creating. And then we're going to specify where we upload this as just a simple by URL option here, and then paste in my folder. And so after we have that all processed and run through the whole system, we can see our source ad was uploaded from this node above. And then as our loop processes over and over again, we can see that we have all of our different ad variations getting uploaded here with slight tweaks. And so if we open this up and start clicking through, we can see how each of these are changing slightly. Maybe it's the call to action, maybe it's the background, maybe it's the main subject. All that's getting tweaked based off of what Gemini thinks is the best ad variant to create based off of the source image and all that information scraped and compiled together into our company or product's brand guidelines. So I hope you found that helpful. That covers it here for our ad variation automation.
All right, before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Seriously, do it, because we're gonna be breaking down all of the AI automations that we use to run all of our businesses. They're super helpful, and we're gonna break down exactly how we do them on this YouTube channel. So make sure to like and then subscribe, and then you'll get notified when we publish new workflows that can make your businesses run 20 times more efficiently, just like we're seeing here at the recap and the other businesses that we're running. The other item is join our school community for free. The link's in the description. You'll be able to get this template, this automation that we just ran through in this video, completely for free. You can go to school and navigate to the video that you want, and then you can download the JSON output for the n8n automation. With that, you can upload it into your n8n, clone it, and then tune it for your business and your use cases. So like and subscribe, join our free community to get this automation for yourself, and we'll see you in the next video.